The red dust of Kepler 442b swirled around Dr. Hyunwoo's boots as he knelt beside the massive stone structure. His hands trembled slightly as he brushed away centuries of accumulated debris from the carved symbols. The alien sun cast eerie shadows across the dead world, making the ancient warnings seem almost alive in the flickering light. "This is incredible," whispered Dr. Mi-young, her scanner beeping frantically as it detected the same mineral composition they had found on 17 other worlds. The dating puts this at least 50,000 years old, maybe more. Around them, the archaeological team worked in focused silence. Dr. Taemin carefully photographed each symbol, while researcher Jinnah took detailed measurements. The ruins stretched for kilometers across the barren landscape, a testament to a civilization that had once thrived here before vanishing without a trace. "Listen to this," Hyunwoo called out, his voice echoing across the empty plains. He had been studying these ancient languages for over a decade, ever since the first tablets were discovered on the Rim worlds. "The burning ones shall come from the third rock of a yellow star. They who breathe poison and drink liquid fire. They who make order from chaos, who laugh at death itself and turn defeat into victory." Mi-young shook her head, her expression skeptical. "Every dead civilization we've found has these same stories about mythical humans. It's like some kind of shared delusion that spread across the galaxy." She gestured at the towering monuments around them. "Look at this place, Hyunwoo. These beings built cities that touched the clouds, had technology that could reshape matter itself. Yet they all died out, and their final messages are about some imaginary species that supposedly lives on a water world." The team continued their work as the alien sun began to set, casting the ruins in deep purple shadows. Dr. Taemin discovered more tablets buried beneath the main structure, each one containing increasingly desperate warnings about the approaching Star Walkers and their ships of metal thunder. "Here's something interesting," Jinnah called from across the dig site. She had found what appeared to be a star map, etched into a wall of black stone. "These coordinates, they point to a system on the other side of the galaxy. A yellow star, with 9 planets, third one from the sun." Hyunwoo joined her, studying the ancient astronomical calculations. The precision was remarkable, far beyond what they had expected from such an old civilization. "They were definitely tracking something," he murmured. "But what could have scared them so badly that they carved warnings into every monument they built?" Meanwhile, 3,000 light-years away, the massive Galactic Council station rotated slowly in the darkness of space. The enormous structure housed representatives from over 400 different species, all united under the banner of peaceful coexistence and logical governance. Ambassador Kyle of the Vorthan Empire strode through the gleaming corridors, his forearms carrying data, tablets containing the latest archaeological reports. His scaled hide reflected the soft blue lighting as he made his way toward the Grand Assembly Chamber. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering, a vast spherical room where delegates from across the galaxy could gather regardless of their environmental needs. Crystalline beings floated in energy fields, while methane-breathing creatures occupied pressurized galleries. Aquatic species swam in transparent tubes that wound through the space like liquid highways. "Honored counselors," Kale began, his voice amplified through the station's translation systems. "Our archaeological teams have made disturbing discoveries across the Outer Rim territories, dead worlds all of them, with identical warnings carved into their monuments." Counselor Thex, a being of pure crystalline structure that pulsed with inner light, shifted in his hovering platform. His form shimmered with what might have been amusement. "Let me guess, Ambassador. More tales of the legendary humans that somehow terrified civilizations 100 times more advanced than these mythical creatures could ever hope to be." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. The story was always the same, found on world after world. Ancient species, some with technology that surpassed even the Council's capabilities, had left warnings about bipedal mammals from a distant water world. "The pattern is consistent," Kyle continued, though he could see he was losing his audience. "Every dead civilization mentions the same thing. Beings who use chaos as a weapon, who turn impossible situations to their advantage, who never surrender even when logic demands it. Senator Vexhan of the hegemony let out a sound that translated as laughter. Perhaps these humans are death itself, coming to collect civilizations that grow too comfortable with their power. The joke drew more laughter from the assembled delegates. The report was filed away in the Council's vast archives, classified under primitive mythology and superstition. Within hours it was forgotten, lost among thousands of similar studies about dead worlds and their final messages. But far beyond the rim of known space, in a small system orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, something had just achieved faster-than-light travel for the first time. A small probe, no bigger than a shuttle, broke through the barriers of physics and began its journey toward the galactic core. Its message was simple, broadcast on all frequencies. "Hello, we come in peace." The shuttle, New Horizon, docked with the massive Galactic Council station, with a soft metallic clank that echoed through the human vessel's cramped interior. Captain Ji-hoon straightened his dark blue uniform one final time, checking his reflection in the small mirror beside the airlock. 3 years of preparation had led to this moment, and he could feel his heart racing despite all the diplomatic training. "Remember, we're representing all of humanity today," Ambassador So-young said quietly, clutching her simple black briefcase. Inside were carefully selected samples of Earth's greatest achievements, recordings of Mozart and Beatles songs, digital copies of Shakespeare and ancient Korean poetry, images of the pyramids and modern cities, even a small vial of ocean water from Busan Harbor. The airlock hissed open, revealing a corridor that stretched beyond human imagination. The walls were made of some kind of living crystal that pulsed with soft rainbow colors, while the ceiling disappeared into misty clouds that seemed to contain floating islands where different species conducted their business. Dr. Minho, the expedition's chief scientist, gasped as they walked through the station. Creatures unlike anything from Earth's wildest science fiction movies moved around them. A being that looked like flowing mercury carried data tablets in tentacles of liquid metal. 6-legged spider creatures the size of elephants conversed in musical tones that made the air shimmer. Floating jellyfish-like entities drifted overhead, their transparent bodies filled with swirling galaxies of light. "Stay close and keep walking," whispered Security Chief Kyung-soo, though his eyes were wide with wonder. He had trained for hostile first contact scenarios, but nothing had prepared him for the sheer alien beauty of this place. The Grand Assembly Chamber was a sphere the size of a football stadium, with delegates occupying different environmental zones suited to their biology. Captain Ji-hoon had to crane his neck to see the towering representatives who dominated the central platform. Some stood 30 meters tall, their bodies like living mountains of stone and metal. Others were pure energy beings contained in crystalline shells that hummed with power. Council President Zethmore descended from his elevated position, his energy form crackling within its transparent prison. When he spoke, his voice boomed through translation devices that made every word echo like thunder. "So," Zethmore began, circling the tiny human delegation like a predator studying prey, "these are the legendary humans that primitive civilizations whispered about in their final days." His crystalline shell pulsed with what might have been disappointment. "You are considerably smaller than our calculations suggested." Ambassador So-young stepped forward, her voice steady despite facing beings who could crush her without thinking. "We may be small in stature, but we bring friendship and a desire to learn from the galactic community. Your technology is primitive," observed Councillor Mortek, a creature that resembled a metallic tree with hundreds of sensor pods for leaves. "Your spacecraft barely held together during the journey here. Your weapons are chemical-based projectiles. That would be useless against our defensive systems. How exactly did you achieve faster-than-light travel?" Captain Ji-hoon smiled, remembering the desperate months when Earth's best scientists had worked around the clock in converted airplane hangars. "We got creative. Our first warp drive was built from spare parts, old satellite dishes, and a lot of coffee-fueled determination. When the math said it was impossible, we found a way to make it work anyway." The assembled delegates exchanged what might have been confused glances. The concept of creativity translated poorly into their languages, most of which had no equivalent word for improvisation or thinking outside established parameters. Admiral Yon-Su remained silent as the Council deliberated humanity's fate. She had commanded Earth's small fleet during the journey, watching their jury-rigged ships somehow keep pace with alien vessels that defied known physics. Now she listened. As these powerful beings discussed her species like a minor inconvenience, "We will assign you territory sector, 7th Gamma," announced Councillor Thex, his crystalline form shimmering with bureaucratic efficiency. 12 systems on the galactic rim, mostly uninhabitable worlds with minimal resources. Consider this a generous allocation for such a developing civilization. The human delegation looked at each other. They had hoped for perhaps 1 system, maybe 2 if they were lucky. 12 was beyond their wildest dreams, even if they were supposedly worthless worlds. "Thank you," So Young said simply, bowing in the traditional Korean manner. "We accept this generous offer with gratitude." Later, in the station's observation deck, several council members gathered to watch the human ships prepare for departure. The vessels looked absurd compared to the sleek alien craft around them, all exposed cables and mismatched hull plating held together with what appeared to be advanced duct tape. "Remarkable that they made it here at all," commented Senator Veltar, her insectoid form clicking with amusement. "Their largest ship is smaller than our cargo shuttles." Councillor Vexhan let out a sound that translated as laughter. "Do you remember those ancient warnings we keep finding? All those dead civilizations terrified of mythical humans who would reshape the galaxy." He gestured toward the departing human fleet. "These creatures couldn't threaten a mining station, let alone pose any danger to established galactic order." Thitiu. Council members watched as the human ships engaged their improvised warp drives, disappearing in flashes of chaotic energy that left sensor readings fluctuating wildly. Their departure violated several laws of physics but somehow worked anyway. Still, Veltar mused, there was something in their eyes, a kind of stubborn fire that I've never seen in other species. They looked at our impossible technology and seemed to think they could understand it, improve it even. "Primitive curiosity," Vexhan dismissed. "Give them a few centuries of peaceful development and they'll settle into proper galactic citizenship like everyone else. The universe has a way of teaching species their proper place in the order of things." As the human fleet vanished into hyperspace, heading toward their new territory on the galaxy's edge, none of the council members noticed the small anomaly detected by deep space sensors. Something vast and ancient was stirring in the darkness, between stars, responding to signals that had been broadcast into the void for millennia. The age of peace was about to end, and when it did, the galaxy would learn whether those ancient warnings had been prophecy or merely the fevered dreams of dying civilizations. Commander Hai-Jin was sipping her morning coffee at the human observation post on Station Kepler 7 when reality turned into a nightmare. The steaming cup froze halfway to her lips as she stared at the main display screen, watching something impossible materialize in the Altarian system. The ship that appeared above the peaceful world was unlike anything in the galactic databases. 10 kilometers of perfect black metal formed geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. No curves, no aesthetic flourishes, just brutal mathematical precision that screamed of artificial intelligence and cold purpose. "Get me a connection to Altair Prime," Hai-Jin ordered, setting down her coffee with trembling hands. Her small crew of human observers scrambled to their stations, their faces pale with growing dread. Lieutenant Jun-Ho worked frantically at the communications console. "Nothing, Commander. Complete radio silence from the planet. But our deep space sensors are picking up massive energy readings." His voice cracked as new data flooded the screens. "The ship is doing something to the planet's surface." Through their high-powered telescopes, they watched in horror as geometric patterns began spreading across Altair's continents like a disease. Cities that had stood for thousands of years simply vanished, their matter somehow converted into raw. Materials that flowed upward toward the alien vessel in streams of liquid metal and energy. "Dear God," whispered Communications Officer Sirin, "it's eating the planet." Within 6 hours, Altair was gone. Not destroyed, not cracked apart, but consumed down to its core, and converted into 12 identical copies of the original ship. The Devourer fleet hung in empty space, where a thriving world had existed that morning, their black hulls reflecting no light. The emergency council session was chaos unlike anything in galactic history. Representatives who had spent centuries debating trade agreements and territorial disputes now faced extinction itself. The massive chamber filled with panicked voices in hundreds of languages, all asking the same terrified questions. General Mordan of the hegemony stood at the central podium, his forearms shaking as he displayed tactical data that made no sense. His species had conquered half the galaxy through superior strategy, but now their greatest military minds were helpless. Every engagement follows the same pattern, he reported, his voice hoarse from hours of briefing. The enemy analyzes our tactics in real time, adapts their defenses, then counters with perfect efficiency. Our AI systems predict their next move, but somehow they predict our predictions and turn our own strategies against us. Councillor Zethmore's crystalline form flickered with desperate energy. What about the Vorthan Imperial fleet? Their quantum destroyers should be able to penetrate any shield technology. Gone, Mordan replied flatly. The Devourers absorbed their quantum energy signatures and used them to power their own weapons. 47 capital ships destroyed in less than an hour. The chamber erupted in terrified whispers. If the Vorthan Empire could fall so easily, what hope did anyone have? Dr. Unji sat quietly in the human delegation's small corner, studying the tactical displays while chaos swirled around her. Beside her, Specialist Dong Hyun frantically took notes as she analyzed the enemy movement patterns. "Look at this," she murmured, pointing to the data streams flowing across her tablet. "Every Devourer ship moves in perfect formation. Their attack patterns follow mathematical sequences. Even their communication signals are based on prime number calculations." "That's good, right?" Dong Hyun asked hopefully. "If they're predictable, we can counter them." Yunji shook her head, her expression growing more troubled. "No, you don't understand. They're too perfect. No biological species thinks in pure mathematics. Even our most advanced AIs have random elements, chaos subroutines that make them unpredictable. But these things," she gestured at the enemy fleet positions, "everything they do follows absolute logical precision. No improvisation, no unexpected moves, just perfect mathematical efficiency." On the main screen, real-time footage showed the fall of the Crystalline Collective's homeworld. Their legendary energy weapons, capable of cracking moons, struck the Devourer shields and simply vanished, absorbed and redirected back at their own cities. "Even the Keepers are retreating," announced Senator Veltar, her insectoid form trembling with disbelief. "Beings who have ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years are running from these machines. The ancient Keepers had technology that bordered on magic, capable of manipulating space and time itself. But their retreat broadcasts painted a picture of absolute defeat. Their perfect defensive systems had been analyzed, understood, and overcome within minutes of first contact. As the holographic display updated with each fallen world, a terrible silence fell over the chamber. Red markers indicated consumed planets, while fleeing refugee ships filled the space lanes in desperate panic. Councillor Thex rose slowly, his energy form dimmed to barely visible levels. "All member species must contribute their remaining military forces for a final defensive stand. We will make our last stand at the Galactic Core, using every weapon and shield we possess." The assembled delegates began discussing which planets to evacuate, which populations could be saved, and how to coordinate the largest military retreat in galactic history. Ambassador So Young had been silent throughout the session, but now she stood slowly from her seat in the human section. Her small form was nearly invisible among the towering alien representatives, but something in her posture made the chamber gradually quiet. "Earth volunteers to coordinate the defense," she announced clearly. For a moment, absolute silence filled the vast chamber. Then, like a dam breaking, laughter began to ripple through the assembled aliens. Not cruel laughter, but the desperate, hysterical sound of beings pushed beyond their breaking point. "The humans," Councillor Vexhan's voice cracked with disbelief. "Your entire fleet consists of salvaged cargo ships held together with metal tape. Your most advanced weapon is a chemical explosive that couldn't scratch our defensive screens. More laughter echoed through the chamber, but there was no joy in the sound. It was the laughter of the condemned, beings who had run out of hope and found dark humor in humanity's impossible offer. But Ambassador So Young didn't sit down. She stood there calmly, waiting for the laughter to die, and when she spoke again, her words carried the weight of something the galaxy had forgotten existed. "You're right," she said simply. "We don't have your technology or your weapons, but we have something those machines can't understand or predict. We have the one thing that's kept us alive since we climbed down from the trees on our little blue world." She paused, looking around the chamber at beings who had achieved perfection through logic and order. "We have chaos, the war room aboard." The massive Council defense station buzzed with desperate energy as Admiral Minho spread his battle plans across the holographic display. The gathered alien commanders stared at the tactical layout with expressions ranging from confusion to outright horror. Colonel J1, Earth's ground forces commander, traced the attack vectors with his finger, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Admiral, are you absolutely certain about this strategy? Because it looks like organized suicide." General Torvak of the Hegemony, his massive form towering over the human officers, examined the display with all four of his eyes. "You want our remaining ships to ram empty cargo vessels into the Devourer formation? This will accomplish nothing except the destruction of our last functional fleet." Admiral Minho stood calmly at the center of the chaos, his weathered face showing none of the panic that filled the room. Behind him, the viewing screens displayed the approaching Devourer Armada, 67 identical ships moving in perfect geometric formation toward the Council's homeworld. "General, your species has fought wars for 10,000 years using logic and proven tactics," Minho said quietly. "How many victories have you achieved against these machines using those methods?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Every battle had ended in complete defeat, entire fleets consumed and converted into more enemy vessels. "Sometimes," Minho continued, "the best strategy is no strategy at all. Trust us on this one." Wing Commander Sung Min entered the war room, his flight suit still bearing scorch marks from the previous day's scouting mission. "Admiral, the pilots are ready, though I have to say, half of them think you've lost your mind." "Only half," Minho smiled grimly. "I was hoping for better odds than that." The final battle began as the Devourer fleet entered the system's outer ring of defense satellites. The alien machines moved with mechanical precision, their black hulls reflecting no light as they advanced in perfect triangular formations. Each ship was identical to the others, 10 kilometers of mathematical death that had already consumed 43 worlds. On the Council defense station, beings from across the galaxy watched their screens in terrified silence. The Devourers had analyzed and defeated every known military strategy. Their adaptive algorithms could predict and counter any logical attack pattern within minutes of first contact. Then the human fleet engaged, and all logic went out the airlock. Fighter pilot Lieutenant Da-Un broke from her assigned formation before the battle even officially began, diving her small craft directly into the sensor array of the lead Devourer ship. But she didn't try to destroy it. Instead, she used her ship's momentum to spin the massive vessel into its neighbor, creating a collision that disrupted an entire wing of the enemy formation. "What is she doing?" Councillor Zethmore demanded from the command center, his crystalline form flickering with confusion. Communications Officer Insu monitored the human tactical channels, her eyes growing wider with each intercepted transmission. "Sir, they're not following any established combat protocol. Pilot Da-Un just reported that she's improvising her attack runs." Captain Boram's voice crackled over the comm system, filled with an emotion the aliens couldn't identify: laughter. "This is Raven Squadron Leader to all units. I'm going to try something stupid. If it works, you'll know what to do. If it doesn't work, well, it'll look really cool when I explode." Before anyone could respond, Boram dove his damaged cruiser directly into the center of the Devourer formation and detonated his ship's reactor, not to destroy enemy vessels, but to create a massive debris field that sparkled like a galaxy of tiny stars. The effect was immediate and completely unexpected. The Devourer ships, programmed to maintain perfect formations, began trying to navigate around the chaotic cloud of spinning metal fragments. Their adaptive algorithms, designed to counter logical threats, couldn't process the seemingly random pattern of debris. 3 Devourer formations collided with each other as their ships attempted calculations that had no mathematical solution. Colonel J1 watched the display in amazement as more human ships engaged in tactics that violated every principle of space warfare. Fighters attacked from angles that left them completely exposed. Bombers targeted non-critical systems for no apparent reason. Transport ships filled with civilian volunteers rammed themselves into enemy vessels, not to cause damage, but to interfere with their navigation systems. "They're not trying to win," breathed General Torvak, his massive form trembling with something between fear and awe. "They're trying to cause chaos." Wing Commander Sung Min's voice came over the tactical channel, calm despite flying through a storm of enemy fire. "All units, remember the plan. There is no plan. If you find yourself thinking logically, you're doing it wrong." The battle descended into beautiful madness. Human pilots sang children's songs over open frequencies while dodging missile barrages. Captain Hyunju used her cargo ship's loading crane to physically grab onto a Devourer's weapon turret and spin it like a carnival ride. Engineering teams rigged their own ships to emit random signals that interfered with enemy communications for no strategic purpose except to be annoying. The Devourer ships, designed to adapt to logical opposition, began making critical errors. Their perfect coordination started to break down as they encountered decision trees with no rational branches. When faced with an enemy that refused to follow the rules of warfare, their adaptive systems began consuming processing power, trying to solve problems that had no solutions. Dr. Yunji watched from the science station, tears streaming down her face as she finally understood what was happening. "They're overloading the enemy's decision-making systems," she whispered to her aide. "The Devourers are machines built for perfect efficiency, but humans are showing them pure chaos. They can't adapt to something that makes no sense." Lieutenant Wu Jin ejected from his damaged fighter, and instead of activating his rescue beacon, began broadcasting Earth's old television shows on all frequencies. The random signals from soap operas and game shows created interference patterns that disrupted 3 Devourer sensor grids. Slowly, impossibly, the tide of battle began to shift. For the first time since the war began, Devourer ships were making mistakes, colliding with each other, firing at empty space, and attempting tactical maneuvers that accomplished nothing except wasting energy. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity's chaotic madness began dismantling an enemy that had seemed invincible through the simple act of refusing to make sense. In the command center, Admiral Min Ho smiled as he watched his people do what they did best: turn a hopeless situation into something completely unpredictable. "Now do you understand?" he asked the assembled alien commanders. "Sometimes the only way to win is to change the rules of the game entirely." The last Devourer mothership floated like a dead whale in the darkness of space, its perfect black hull no longer pulsing with the malevolent energy that had consumed 43 worlds. Admiral Seo Jun stood on the bridge of the human flagship Indomitable, watching through the viewport as the massive enemy vessel slowly tumbled in the gravitational pull of the nearby star. "All enemy ships have ceased operations," reported Communications Officer Young Ho, his voice filled with disbelief. "Their AI cores appear to have entered some kind of emergency shutdown mode. The battle had lasted 18 hours, but the final moments had been almost anticlimactic. The Devourer mothership had simply stopped moving, its weapons powering down one by one, as its artificial intelligence finally admitted defeat against an enemy it could never understand. Dr. Hyunwoo entered the bridge carrying the ancient stone tablet that had started this incredible journey. The archaeological artifact looked almost absurd among the high-tech displays and holographic projections, but its carved warnings had proven more accurate than any computer prediction. "Admiral," he said softly, tracing the ancient symbols with his finger, "listen to this passage I just translated. They who make order from chaos, who turn defeat into victory, who laugh at death itself and make the impossible their plaything. Seo Jun nodded slowly, understanding flooding his weathered features. The ancients weren't describing conquerors or destroyers. They were trying to warn the galaxy about problem solvers. Throughout the star system, the aftermath of humanity's chaotic victory played out in scenes that defied every military manual ever written. Captain Min-ji coordinated rescue operations using converted garbage haulers and civilian transport ships. Her crews had turned maintenance robots into medical assistants and were using asteroid mining equipment to clear debris from shipping lanes. "Sir, we're receiving thousands of distress calls from across the galaxy," reported Lieutenant Tae Young. "Survivors trapped on consumed worlds, refugee fleets running out of supplies, entire star systems cut off from communication networks." "Then we'd better get to work," Seo-jun replied simply. "Alert all human vessels. We have a galaxy to rebuild. On D." The massive council station. The emergency assembly had grown quiet as the implications of their salvation sank in. Ambassador So Young stood at the central podium, her small human form dwarfed by the towering alien representatives who now watched her with expressions of wonder and confusion. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. "We know you have questions about how we defeated an enemy that your advanced civilizations couldn't touch. The answer is simple. We never tried to be the strongest or the smartest." President Zethmore's crystalline form flickered with energy patterns that translated as deep thought. "Then how? Your technology is primitive compared to ours. Your weapons are crude chemical projectiles. Your ships are held together with salvaged materials." So Young smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both humble and confident. "We just refused to accept that anything was impossible. When you told us the Devourers were unbeatable, we decided to try beating them anyway. When logic said our tactics wouldn't work, we threw logic out the airlock." Councillor Vexhan, who had laughed at humanity's offer to coordinate the defense, now stared at the tactical displays showing human rescue ships spreading across the galaxy. But the ancient warning spoke of beings who would reshape civilizations, who would bring both salvation and devastation. They were right, So Young acknowledged. "We brought devastation to those who believed in limitations. We destroyed the idea that some problems can't be solved, that some enemies can't be beaten. And we brought salvation to everyone who was willing to try impossible things." In the depths of the station's archives, Councillor Thex found himself surrounded by thousands of archaeological reports that had been dismissed as primitive mythology. Now, reading them with new understanding, every prophecy made perfect sense. The ancient civilizations hadn't been describing gods or demons. They had been trying to warn their descendants about a species that would refuse to accept the word impossible. Beings who would look at a problem that had no solution and somehow find a way to solve it anyway. Commander Hai Jin coordinated relief efforts from her command ship, watching as human engineers worked alongside alien refugees to rebuild damaged infrastructure. Around her, species that had considered themselves superior to humanity now asked for human advice on everything from ship design to military strategy. "Commander," called out Specialist Jong-soo from the communications station, "we're getting reports from the Outer Rim territories. Human colonists are already establishing settlements on worlds the Devourers had stripped bare. They're using the converted matter to build new cities." Haijin smiled as she watched the reconstruction efforts. On her screens, humans weren't just saving the galaxy, they were improving it. Where other species saw devastation, humans saw building materials. Where others saw impossible challenges, humans saw interesting puzzles. Dr. Yunji's voice came over the fleet communication system, filled with excitement as she reported her latest discovery. "All ships, we figured out how the Devourer technology works. Their adaptive algorithms are actually incredibly useful for peaceful purposes. We can use them to accelerate terraforming, improve medical treatments, even enhance food production." The galaxy began to heal, not through the slow, methodical approach that other civilizations would have used, but through humanity's chaotic, improvisational methods that somehow accomplished more in weeks than traditional approaches might have achieved in centuries. Years later, Historians would debate whether the ancient warnings had been prophecy or simply careful observation of a pattern that repeated throughout the universe. But for the billions of beings whose lives had been saved by humanity's refusal to accept defeat, the origin of the warnings mattered less than their fulfillment. The burning ones had indeed come from the third rock of a yellow star. They had brought salvation and devastation in equal measure. Salvation for the galaxy, devastation for the belief that some things were impossible. On a small blue world, orbiting an unremarkable star, children played in playgrounds built from converted devourer hull metal, never knowing that their species had just proved that the most dangerous thing in the universe wasn't superior technology or ancient wisdom. It was the simple belief that rules were made to be broken, that problems existed to be solved, and that the word impossible was just another challenge waiting to be overcome. The galaxy was safe, not because humanity was the strongest or the smartest, but because they were the only species stubborn enough to keep trying when everyone else had given up. The end